Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. Hey, good Friday morning to one and all. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor today. Sitting alongside me is Patrice Onwuka. Happy Friday to you, Patrice.
Happy Friday, Larry. Oh, my goodness, I messed it up.
That's all right.
Happy
okay.
Friday, Andrew.
At least I didn't call you either Julie or Heather, which I've been known to do, Patrice. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Happy Friday.
it happens.
Force of halibut, as I like to say. Yes, it is Friday. It is March 1st. Rabbit, everybody. We got a great show coming up later on. We got Kathy Szeliga, delegate from Maryland, talking about this insane story out of the Maryland legislature. We got Pat Mara from the D.C. Republicans to talk about the D.C. primary. Mike O'Reilly, who's on the FCC, he's a commissioner there, is going to join. Jenny Taylor, who's an immigration reporter, is going to talk about the border visits yesterday. Mike Litterst from the National Park Service is going to talk about the cherry blossoms. And Brett Baer is going to join us as well to talk about the border visits yesterday, dueling border visits, very similar to dueling banjos, I suspect. Right now, joining us though, very excited, is Jack Smith. He's a legal fellow and manager of the Supreme Court and Appellate Advocacy Program at the Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Zack, Elon Musk has a subpoena fight with the SEC. What's going on there, and how's the Supreme Court involved?
Well, thanks so much for having me on this morning to talk about this. You know, this is a very interesting case. The SEC has been pursuing Elon Musk for a variety of things over the past several years. They've asked for, a ton of documents from him. They've asked him to sit for several interviews related to his acquisition of Twitter. And so they finally issued a subpoena to him where they were, supposedly going to require him to sit for a third interview to try to find out if he violated securities laws in all of his dealings and all of his maneuvers in order to acquire Twitter. And so finally, Elon Musk, through his lawyer, said, enough, I'm not going to sit for this third deposition. He raised a variety of defenses as to why he shouldn't have to sit for it. But interestingly, one of the defenses he raised was that the SEC staff who issued the subpoena to him didn't have the authority to do that. And the reason he said they didn't have, the authority to do that is because he said they were not properly appointed, that their appointment didn't conform with the Constitution, and he cited several recent Supreme Court cases where the SEC's appointment of certain officials has been challenged as well. And so this is a very interesting case, and one I think that we're going to hear more about in the not-so-distant future.
You know, Zack, one of the things I've been talking about in the policy work that I do is something that Wayne Cruz at CEI calls the whole-of-government approach to their ideological goals of the administration, using a multitude of agencies to go and attack whether or not it's an issue target or a person target. And in this case, can this be considered an example of lawfare? I mean, we're talking about once Elon Musk decided to open up Twitter and nominally open up Twitter and deal with the issues of censorship and shadow banning and all that, the administration went against him, full bore, whether it's this case or the DOL case and other situations. Talk a little bit about that, my good friend.
Well, no, I think that's a fair point. Absolutely, Andrew. Elon Musk certainly says that the SEC has been engaged in abusive tactics, abusive litigation, lawfare against him, trying to wear him down, essentially harass him in some ways. But look, I think there's a larger issue at stake here. I think all of us are aware that the administrative state is out of control, that unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats exercise far too much authority in our current system of government. This is not how the framers of our Constitution envisioned that things should operate. And part of Elon Musk's challenge, he said he may not raise it because it's not necessary to resolve this particular dispute. But one of the things he raised in his filings is a potential challenge to a case from 1935 that says that certain officials, certain bureaucrats can essentially be insulated from removal by the president. He says that's a wrong decision. It's been widely criticized. And if he has to continue this fight against the SEC, he may ask the Supreme Court to review that decision that prevents the president from removing certain officials.
Zack, we're speaking with Zack Smith from the Heritage Foundation. This is so interesting to me. I geek out a little bit with Andrew sometimes on the government overreach, and we see some of these different agencies, particularly not necessarily the SEC, but like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau,
right,
really formed and shaped in ways that are supposed to insulate them from Congress and Congress's oversight by just their funding mechanisms.
Right.
Here, it's a little bit different at the SEC. But broadly, I mean, do you think that the Supreme Court is going to take this challenge? And if so, do you expect that maybe the Supreme Court ruling would dismantle both the SEC and just broadly have a broad overreach, not overreach, but broad implications for other agencies where you're seeing these unelected bureaucrats making, frankly, what should be legislative done through Congress, not through government agencies?
Look, that's a great question. This particular fight that Elon Musk is having with the SEC is still in the federal district court out in California. Okay. So it has several levels of review to go before it would get to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. But there is a pending case at the Supreme Court that could potentially impact Elon Musk's dispute with the SEC, as well as impact many other administrative agencies. Most agencies have in-house, they essentially legislate, they create rules, they essentially prosecute cases, they bring enforcement actions, and then they also adjudicate, hear quasi-court case type actions, all in-house within their agencies. And the officials who act as judges in those adjudications, they're called administrative law judges, but there's a challenge at the Supreme Court right now that says, look, these administrative law judges, they exercise a lot of authority. They're insulated from removal by the president by multiple layers, and that's improper under the Constitution. And so Elon Musk, he actually filed a brief along with Mark Cuban and some other billionaires who have been subjected to an SEC enforcement actions in that case, essentially weighing in on the side of the person challenging the appointment and insulation from removal of those administrative law judges. And Elon Musk said, look, the outcome of that case at the Supreme Court right now could impact my subpoena fight with the SEC. And so really we should wait to see how the Supreme Court resolves that before we definitively resolve this dispute he's having right now.
It seems like we've got a lot of cases that are seeming to return us to the course that the Constitution set out. Zack, how do folks find out more about the good work that you are doing over at the Meese Center at the Heritage Foundation?
Well, I appreciate that. They can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at TZ Smith, or they can go to heritage.org and see everything I've written, as well as all of the great stuff all of my colleagues at Heritage have written as well.
I am going to go follow you at TZ Smith right now on, I still call it Twitter. Zack, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me on.
WMAL. Making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
When she has stars in her eyes, call Mervis Diamond Importers. Her dream diamond is at Mervis.
WMAL, making sense of education, because what's happening in your kid's school matters. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Well, we didn't go anywhere. We're still talking, me and Patrice. I'm Andrew Langer and Larry O'Connor today. Sorry. Sometimes you just have a ham-handed segue like that, and I do apologize for those things. So, listen, we keep peeling back on the issue of the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is especially going to be a tense discussion going into this election season, as it looks like it's definitely going to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. There are going to be dueling discussions as to the response to COVID, who did what better, who did what worse, and part of at the center of this is the development and deployment of the COVID-19 vaccine. This story here, Select Committee Chairman, the COVID-19 Select Committee Chairman Brad Wenstrup has opened an investigation into the Biden administration following this month's testimony from FDA Director Dr. Peter Marks admitting that they may have rushed the vaccine approval to meet an arbitrary mandate set by the White House. And this gets into this is really serious. Now, you and I spend a lot of time, Patrice, in our policy lives talking about the fact that it does take way too long to get things approved, drugs approved. It's a very long process. But there are reasons why we have benchmarks and set, because we don't want to. Here's what I come back to. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this. Back in my early policy days, I read a 1992 Supreme Court case called New York versus United States. And in it, the Justice O'Connor wrote, "The Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we might resist the temptation to concentrate power in one branch as the expedient solution to the crisis of the day." And what Justice O'Connor was saying is that policy made in a crisis, I'm banging on my desk here, policy made in a crisis is always bad policy. Always bad policy, or invariably bad policy. And we're starting to see that here. This quote here from this story: "The FDA seemingly disregarded the warnings, dismissed the scientists who brought forward concerns, and went forward with the accelerated approval process. The day after approval, the Biden administration announced its first COVID-19 vaccine mandate." Here, your thoughts on this? It's so much to unpack.
Well, this is what is so concerning. And I'll start off, number one, you are absolutely right that in this very likely Trump-Biden rematch, that it's going to get down to the nuances of how they both responded to the COVID virus and the differences in their administration's response. And I think this is a puzzle piece in that distinction. What's the difference between the expedited process that was used to develop the vaccines, and part of that we understood was overcoming some of the regulatory barriers and that are erected, some for good reason, maybe some that were unnecessary, versus the rollout and the distribution of it. And remember, President candidate Biden at the time ran on, "I've got a plan. I'm going to get the vaccine out. I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country, and I'm going to get everything back on track." And if his plan included rushing the process, the regulatory process, in a way that was that cut corners and did not allow the research that needed to be done or shared, then there's a lot of culpability. It's going to be interesting, though, to see where it falls and where people believe it falls.
And leading into the mandates themselves. That's the other part of this. Michael, can you do me a favor? Michael, can you go back? In the last hour, we were talking about Lloyd Austin and his testimony before Congress yesterday. And there's a really interesting exchange between Lloyd Austin and Matt Gaetz about the vaccine mandates and how this ties into Lloyd Austin's disclosures. Michael, please play cut number 3.
You didn't tell the president that you had cancer, that you were being treated for cancer, or that the treatment for that cancer had gone wrong, because you saw it as personal and medical. And I think a lot of us have empathy for you in that regard. But now that you see how personal medical decisions are, will you call for the re-recruitment, restoration of full rank and back pay for the 8,600 service members who were vax mandated out of the military?
No, I won't.
Oh, wow.
Listen, at least he's honest,
right? That man.
I mean, it really is the moxie, the chutzpah. Obviously, the prostate cancer ceremony didn't take away his chutzpah there. I mean, this is where we are here. We may talk a little bit more about this, because this is we are an unserious people. Listen, we got so much more to get to right now at 6:22 here on WMAL. So this is fascinating, Patrice. Looking at this, so this is a letter that Brad Wenstrup, who's the chairman of the Select Committee on COVID-19, he sent a letter yesterday to the FDA Commissioner Robert Califf, talking about this testimony that Dr. Marks gave, in which Chairman Comer asked regarding on February 15th. Dr. Marks was testifying up on the Hill. Comer asked him, do you recall any conversations regarding the need to approve the vaccines in order for it to then be mandated? And Dr. Marks admitted there was an acknowledgement that an approval could allow vaccine mandates to occur. And this is what is spurring this, guys, which is, again, this political decision-making on the part of the administration, as you said, Patrice, and rightly so. I'm Joe Biden. I'm running. Donald Trump has no plan, even though Donald Trump had a plan. We can agree with the plan or not agree with the plan. He had a plan. And Joe Biden's plan meant accelerating the approval in order to get these mandates on the books. This is big stuff. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it's just exposing what I think we've all thought, which is that there was a lot of there had to have been backroom dealings to make the mandates possible, and now we're seeing it exposed. Again, we always forget, but thank goodness this is what happens when conservatives have oversight power.
Right.
Because of a conservative majority in the House, it would be great if we had one in the Senate and the presidency. Then you could do a lot more. But oversight exposes what happens in the darkness, and in 2020 there was a lot of darkness. There are a lot of things that went on in the dark that we were forced to live with the repercussions of, and the fact that even to this day the Biden administration is unwilling to apologize to the Americans who's lost their livelihoods because of their unfair mandates. It's wrong.
Well, and unapologetic is right. I'm sorry, Michael. Please do me a favor. Go ahead and play that. I'm sorry. No, you're turning red quickly. Go ahead and play that clip again real quick. I think we all need to hear the colloquy between Matt Gaetz and Lloyd Austin.
You didn't tell the president that you had cancer, that you were being treated for cancer, or that the treatment for that cancer had gone wrong because you saw it as personal and medical. And I think a lot of us have empathy for you in that regard. But now that you see how personal medical decisions are, will you call for the re-recruitment, restoration of full rank and back pay for the 8,600 service members who were vax mandated out of the military?
No, I won't.
I have to laugh.
Wow.
I mean, it really is just crazy. And it underscores exactly what Patrice was saying. This was their plan all along.
It was.
They are unapologetic. You know, it reminds me, there was a book that came out in the 90s, Patrice. The Sierra Club had their youngest president ever, a guy named Adam Werbach. And he wrote a book called Act Now, Apologize Later. That's the mantra of the left. Listen, after the news, we got Kathy Szeliga joining us to talk about insanity in the Maryland legislature. I'm Andrew Langer. This is O'Connor and Company, WMAL.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Andrew Langer, in for Larry O'Connor here on WMAL. We are making sense of the news right here on News Talk 105.9. I'm joined by Patrice Onwuka. Hello, Patrice.
Happy Friday, Andrew.
Happy Friday. I should say it the other way around. I am joining Patrice Onwuka because, again, this is, as I said earlier, this is Patrice's studio. The rest of us are just here. Listen, we got a great show coming up. We got Pat Mara from the D.C. Republicans to talk about the D.C. primary, former FCC Commissioner Michael Riley to talk about what's going on with the Biden FCC. Jenny Tair, she's an immigration reporter. We're going to talk about the Biden Trump-Biden border visits. Also, Brett Baer joining us later on. And, of course, Mike Litterist from the National Park Service to talk about the cherry blossoms. Joining us right now to help us unpack just what is going on in Annapolis is Delegate Kathy Szeliga. Kathy, first of all, it's always great to talk to you. I'm so glad we get this chance. You dropped me a nice email yesterday. Annapolis is like its own little bubble. State Circle is its own little bubble. The rules of reality, the world in which the rest of us have to live in, it doesn't seem to well, in fact, actually, Kathy, before we talk about this, here is Fox 45. Here is Fox 45 talking about this piece of legislation out of Maryland.
Opponents of the bill worry it could make teachers' jobs harder and make them feel less safe.
Like, it's okay
to have rules. It's okay to enforce those rules. Consequences are good. That's how kids learn. And if we're taking all that away and now putting all the onus on the teachers to be, now referees and boxing officials and all kinds of other things, it's completely unfair.
Senate Bill 512.
Senator Alonzo Washington introduced the bill to address the school-to-prison pipeline.
They don't need to be sentenced. They need help.
He says the goal is to combat racial and disability disparities by addressing the poor behavior of students without criminalizing them under Maryland's education code.
A student should not be treated like a criminal.
I mean, Kathy, do the laws of physics just not work in Annapolis? Do they not have to abide by the same rules that the rest of us do? What's going on in Annapolis?
There's a lot of magical thinking that goes on in Annapolis. Look, come on, Andrew and Patrice. It's unicorns and rainbows. And common sense does not reside there. So, you have to ask yourself, for those who live in Maryland, House Bill 615 today on the floor for third reading. It's going to pass because when the Democrats want it to pass, it's going to pass. But, you have to ask yourself, especially if you're a parent or grandparent, are your kids safe in school today? Do you feel like your kids are safe in school, on the bus, or at a sporting event, extracurricular activity? And I think people would say, no, I really don't feel like my kids are safe at school. So their solution to this would be to have less punishment. So we're gonna
here's the thing,
once
Kathy,
again focus on the bad kids and forget the victims of these kids
they can't have it both ways, can they, Kathy? Right? Because they can't say that there isn't a problem of student behavior. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this bill, because there wouldn't be any need to correct this idea that these students are being unfairly punished. Obviously, there is a problem in these schools such that there are enough kids being punished for these issues that Alonzo Washington, who, by the way, I guess initially he was appointed to the House of Delegates in 2012, and then he was appointed to the Maryland State Senate in 2023. This is. I mean, obviously, there's a problem. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about what we're talking about now.
Yeah, I think there's a focus on the wrong kids. The focus should be on keeping teachers safe. I'm a former educator,
right?
And the stories I hear from teachers are, just so sad and heartbreaking. And teachers are fleeing the profession. Why? Because the administration doesn't have their back, right? So, what are we going to do to make your kids safe at school? That's who we should be looking at. So currently, the law says a person may not willfully disturb or otherwise willfully prevent orderly conduct of activities. They may not molest or threaten with bodily harm any student, employee, administrator, or agent. So they're striking that. They're saying, no, we didn't really mean that. Now, if you're a student at that school, you can do all those things. Like if you go to, Robert Johnson Elementary School and you throw a chair at a teacher, right now you can get in trouble for that. After this bill passes, if you're a student at that school and you throw a chair at a teacher or you beat up another kid in the hallway, we're going to say, no, you need a hug and a turkey sandwich. That's
Kathy,
what you need.
It's insanity, but this is what the equity agenda looks like in practice. This idea that somehow you're helping Black and brown Hispanic children by lowering standards and removing punishments and accountability for personal choices and personal behavior. I mean, I think that's what we're getting at here. I can't help but wonder, though, what about the role of the parents? I mean, you have intimate information. Is there a way? Is there a level of responsibility on the part of parents for their children's behavior?
Well, Patrice, there should be. But, this is saying that, we're going to give them a hug. We're going to give them a turkey sandwich. We're going to give them some kind of diversion program, but we shouldn't give them real consequences other than, something like that. And teachers that talk to me feel like the administration does not have their back. So when these problems happen in the classroom and they send the kids to the office, the principal and administration in many schools, now there are good principals, I'm not casting aspersions on all of them, but I hear by and large the vice principal is generally in charge of discipline, they send them back to the classroom. But what we have is, I have a letter in front of me from the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, and they supported this bill. And, one of the things they want to do is reform student discipline to, quote, prohibit zero tolerance policies. Now, if I'm a teacher and someone punches me in the face, I would like a zero tolerance policy.
Sure, yes.
If my student is in elementary, middle, or high school and a kid attacks my child, another student attacks my child and beats him up, like we see him post these videos online, right? Their moment of fame, I want a zero tolerance policy on that. Why is that bad? Andrew, why is that bad to say we will not accept you beating up teachers and beating up other students?
Kathy, you're absolutely right. Listen, as our producer Heather has said, Maryland Democrats always have the wrong solution. Kathy Szeliga, we have to leave it there. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
All right, great to be on. Talk to you later.
Listen, we've got more coming up. It's 6:45 on WMAL. As soon as Kathy Szeliga said that this was Alonzo Washington pushing this bill, who's now a Maryland state senator, I just, I wanted to go peel back a little bit more about things that Alonzo Washington has done. And so early on in his career, he was, no, not even early on. In July 2020, Washington was appointed by Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks, that we don't know who she is, to lead a task force to look at reforming the county's police department. The task force presented a list of recommendations in its final report in December of 2020, which included repealing the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, getting rid of military equipment, blah, 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 blah. 46 of the plan's 50 recommendations were implemented. I mean, and then I got this one. I love this one. Sit here, Patrice. How many kids do you have? I mean, we don't normally talk about kids, but how many kids do you have?
Three boys.
3 boys. I have 2 girls who are now in college. Washington introduced legislation in the 2021 legislative session that would allow students to take a day off once every quarter for mental health reasons. I mean, I
thought that's what Saturday and Sunday are for, right? I mean come on now.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead. The bill, and here's the thing. Hold on, time out for a second. The bill passed the Maryland House of Delegates by a vote of 131 to 1.
Oh.
I mean,
and that is the problem.
Right.
That is the problem. We have people in Maryland who are co-signing the failure of our children and the failure of our future when we have kids who are can't read at graduation, high school graduation. This, and they think that this is helpful. Andrew, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to when I say this, but it's got to be the money. I know.
Right.
It's got to be the money that's pushing behind these George Soros-funded prosecutors and, frankly, a lot of these leftist progressive ideas around criminal justice, that somehow you could treat the criminal with kid gloves and society is better off for that.
I am going to feed into your conspiracy theory. I was going to go in a whole different direction here because he also was behind legislation about vaccine mandates that was vetoed by Governor Hogan, and then the legislative overrode it. But on that issue of Soros, the Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros, one of George Soros, their main, in fact, I think it's their only actual Open Society Foundation offspring is headquartered in America, is headquartered in Baltimore. And I have long talked about this issue of the fact that since the Open Society Foundation made its headquarters in the 90s in Baltimore, things have gotten progressively worse both in Baltimore and in Maryland. It is just crazy. So yeah, you are right on there.
There's something. There's a connection there. There's a connection.
Without a doubt, and the time has come to stop these just insanely progressive experimentations on our kids. It's 6:52 here on O'Connor and Company, WMAL.